Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Tuesday, a little bit of a sell-off Tuesday. We'll get into that in just a second. When we look back to yesterday, however, and we're looking at the markets and the divergence that we have been seeing, it continues to be the case. And as a matter of fact, the Dow finished the day up over 100 points. Meanwhile, you look over at the NASDAQ, kind of fluttering around all day long. It did finish in positive territory, up 10 points. So not a very participatory day for the NASDAQ, that's for sure. The infrastructure bill, that was a big part of what we were seeing yesterday, as a matter of fact, and had a huge influence on what was really moving to the upside and some of the strength. And we obviously had a market that was shifting and moving all over the place, a lot like today, although today's market is shifting and moving, but primarily to the downside. We'll get into that in just a second. So we're looking over at crude oil, trading right around 82. And that's been sort of where we found ourselves. Yes, we dipped under 80 for a day or two. And then we've kind of been finding ourselves somewhere between 81 and maybe even call it 83. So there we are at 82, volatility index right around 17. Now, the curious part about yesterday's market was the market was positive. The Dow was moving to the upside. We had some great numbers moving throughout the day. And yet the volatility index just continued to kind of climb throughout the session. Matter of fact, up like 8 or 10% during the session. So that was something that stood out. The 10-year also stood out because now it was under 1.5. Matter of fact, trading right around 1.49 yesterday. So that was something that's not necessarily a head scratcher, but something to keep an eye on because we've been talking about this 10-year for a while now, and the fact that it had been kind of slowly, methodically moving to the upside. Well, that same methodical movement has been pushing it back to the downside as well. So infrastructure bill, we talk about that. Well, what was leading yesterday? Materials up better than 1%, 1.25% yesterday. Energy was up about 1%. Technology was up decent. And we had consumer discretionary. That was getting brought out to the woodshed just a little bit yesterday, down about 1.5% or so. So I look at Bitcoin trading around 66,000. And by the way, really nice start to the day today for Bitcoin. But we'll get into that a little bit in just a moment or so. Volumes. Now, those volumes that we talk about each and every day, how about 47.4 million to follow up that 50 plus million on the previous trading session last Friday? Unbelievable volumes just continue. Here's the million contract club from yesterday. AMD, nearly 2 million contracts. Tesla, 1.4 million contracts. Ford, 1.3 million contracts. Lucid, 1 million contracts. Kind of see a little bit of a theme there? You probably do. And Ford, more and more, just the attraction that people have had in this movement. Is it a meme / rebel stock? I don't know. None of us are going to be able to answer that. But certainly we are seeing volumes in stock, volumes in option that have absolutely been exploding to the upside for Ford. So what were some of the movers yesterday? Live Nation getting hammered. We all know the storyline. We don't need to get into that any more than we did yesterday, but down about 5%. Tesla was also down yesterday. Tesla was down, but we had the rest of the EV community definitely was moving to the upside. Penn Gaming, that stock's been under a little bit of pressure. That was down about 4.5% yesterday, but there was some strengths out there. You look at anything in the infrastructure side of things, and you certainly start to see a nice move to the upside out of CF, out of Nucor, out of CAT, all those names up 3.5% or more. You had Freeport Mac up 6.5% yesterday, copper. And don't forget, I bring this up all the time, and we had late in the session, we had a very, very large buyer of some calls just a few months out. I think they were going out to January yesterday in Freeport Mac, but that's a stock that was up 6.5%. And when we talk about copper, that is very, very integral in terms of what goes on and what's needed within the EV space as well. AMD had an extraordinary day yesterday, talking about that Meta partnership and all the rest of that. So those EV names were absolutely rocking. So today, the divergence, the divide is still there. But we look early on, we look at the NASDAQ. NASDAQ's trading pretty decent. It was up like 40, 50 points. You look over at the Dow, and it was down 60, 70 points. Not too terrible. Not anything that we're going to wring our fingers and hands about. But we started to accelerate a little bit off of that. And you start looking, and before we know it, we had a big flip from the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ flip, it headed south. As a matter of fact, it was down, I think, well over 100, 130 points or so. Bounced back a little bit, down about 80 last I looked. As a matter of fact, the Dow's down anywhere between, call it 150 and maybe 185, somewhere in that that world, but that definitely took an accelerated move to the downside after we got into the open. We started getting into the day. Now we look over at crude. Crude still hanging in there near 82, got up towards 83. I'm looking over at the 10-year. That's down again, down about 4%. That's trading right around 143, 144, somewhere in that sort of category. But I did mention Bitcoin yesterday, about 66,000. We got up well over 68,000, but we've pulled off of that number. Not surprising, as the markets are kind of shifting around, a little nervousness. As a matter of fact, speaking of nervousness, how about that volatility index? We're looking at 1720 to as high as 1850. Before I came on here, we were trading, call it about 18 and a quarter. So certainly seeing that volatility elevate yesterday, it's elevating again today, and specifically as we're seeing the market sell off pretty fast. Consumer discretion, that was strong early. Financials weren't strong, but they actually were a little bit weak and got a lot more weak. We saw those consumer discretionary numbers, and we're looking at those. They were up about 0.5%, then they were down about 0.5%. Just a complete flip from the pre-markets and right at the start of the day into that first hour of trade. We'll see if that changes at all as we get deeper into the trading session. Some of the big movers today, GE, this announcement of a triple split, and could be pretty interesting. Well, that shot the stock up well over 7% early on. A lot of commentary. We had the CEO on CNBC just a little while ago. By the way, I will be doing the halftime report today, so I'll see you in not too long. NVIDIA was strong right out of the gate. AMD looked pretty decent. Best Buy looked strong. PayPal did not. PayPal was under pressure. It was down about 10% last I looked, but we were seeing some of those chip stocks really starting to react and still moving to the upside. And then it turned, and then we've seen a little bit of a pullback there as well. So yesterday, for unusual, we had the trade desk, TTD. I got it again for you. That's the craziness of this market that we're seeing right now. So yesterday, stock was trading about 85.85. They were buying the 90 strike calls. Well, today they're buying the 95 strike calls because that stock continues to move to the upside, or it did at least as in early trade. As a matter of fact, this was one of the very first trades that hit today. And matter of fact, a buyer of 10,000 of the November 12th, that's this week's Friday's expiration cycle, those 95 calls, those were about $1.20 up to about $3.10. We'll see if that's able to play out, because obviously with this pull that we're seeing in the markets right now, that is affecting a lot of different parts of the market as well. Secondly, I've got Micron. Now, we talk about a lot of these chips and a lot of the strength that we've seen from NVIDIA, from AMD, from some of the other names out there. Micron hitting today, stock trading around 75.80. It did pull back a little bit last I looked as the markets were pulling back, but we had a buyer of 8,600 of Friday's expiring November 12th, the 80 calls. So stock trading just under 76 in the 75s, and we have this 80 strike calls being bought, 17 cents up to about 34 cents for these, 8,600 of them buying. So seeing some decent paper early on. Obviously, the shifting around in the markets, that's something that usually we start to get a little bit more of a rhythm into the markets after the first hour or so. We'll see if that happens. But I will see on the halftime report, we got all kinds of different things to cover today. A lot of very, very interesting trades going on. Mr. Wonderful is going to be joining us, along with Saratsati, who's one of the all-time greats. And I believe Stephanie Link is the fourth person as well. Wonderful lady who really does know her things. Look forward to seeing you guys at the halftime report. Have a great day of trading.